You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, it's good to be back with you again. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, and I'm your host, Steve Mighty Blue Adams. I thru-hiked the trail twice in my 60s, and I interview a bunch of people who've either done the AT or another long-distance trail, or somebody who has a strong connection to the trail. And that last category is our guest today. I met Lee Lovelace, or Tush, at Trail Days earlier this year. We were in the author's tent together and spent a fair amount of time just chatting about the trail. But Lee, apart from having probably the best trail name ever, had a story quite unique in guests I've had on the show, so I invited him to record with me. We're going to hear from him soon. After Lee, our class of 23 has whittled down to just 3, with Mary Marks, Jessica Wright and Joanne Flagg still on the go. When we left Mary last week, she was coming out of the 100-mile wilderness, but she planned to spend the week kicking her heels in Bangor, waiting for some family members to join her on her ascent this past Monday. We're going to find out in a moment how that went. Then Jessica and Joanne will update us on their progress as they're experiencing quite different hikes. Finally, George Stefanos is closing in on the Kennebec with less than 250 miles to go. By the way, I recently reached out to George and he agreed to come on the show to talk about his hike 40 years ago. Not sure when that will be, but I'm really looking forward to chatting with him. So let's get to it and hear from Lee Lovelace, or Tush. Today we have that rarest of creatures, a hiker who has written a novel about the AT. This is Lee Lovelace, or Tush. Hey Lee, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Well, it's on for us as well. And we actually met at Trail Days and we spent many hours talking to each other, chatting because we were right next to each other in the author's tent. But you've also got not only a great trail name, but also a great story as to how you got that name. Please share it.
Okay, yeah, that's a story, all right. So I have a license plate on my Jeep, which is a Virginia Appalachian Trail plate, and I personalized it with HKRTSH, which any of us hikers would know right away. It stands for hiker trash. However, my friends, especially the ones at work, they're not hikers, didn't understand what it meant, and a couple of them asked me, what does that stand for, hooker tush or something? So I told that story to a group of hikers, and that's what they named me for my trail name.
Fatal error. Hooker tush, that is a great name. What a classic.
I always have to say, when I say the name, when someone asks me what my trail name is, I always have to say, hooker tush, not as bad as it sounds.
Yeah, it does sound pretty bad. Yeah, and of course you didn't have to accept it, but you obviously chose to, so good for you. So let's delve into your hiking. How did you get into it in the first place?
About 10 years ago, I took my wife on a Valentine's Day long weekend to a cabin up in the Blue Ridge in Virginia. Nice. And the guy there that was running the place, I asked him, hey, what's to do around here? And he's like, do you like to hike? And I was like, well, I used to hike years earlier. And I was like, yeah, sure, I like to hike. And so he told me about a local trail called Crabtree Falls, but he gave me a map that was actually a section of the AT map in that area. And when I looked at the map, I got interested. I'd heard about the Appalachian Trail, but I had no idea it ran all the way from Georgia to Maine.
Most people don't, do they?
No, they don't. And the thing is, we camped around here before, and I didn't even know the Appalachian Trail was within a mile of where we were camping. So nice. I looked at the map, and I got really interested in it, and started looking up stuff on the internet, found blogs. Back then, blogs weren't that big of a deal, but started watching vlogs when those came on the scene and got out there myself.
Right. And what was it about was it the romance, the adventure, or was it just being alone in the woods? What was it? What is it that gets you about hiking?
It's a little bit of both, but the biggest thing to me is the community. I'm pretty much of an introverted guy by nature, but when I get out on the trail, it seems to all go away. When I meet hikers on the trail, I bond with them, and I just love it. And of course, you can't beat the views once you finally get up there and catch your breath.
That's your reward, isn't it? Every time.
Yep.
But interestingly, what you said is quite interesting, because you're a writer now. You're writing novels,
Mm-hmm.
and that's Lee Lovelace. But is Hooker Tush a different guy?
Hooker Tush is kind of a different guy. He's the guy that just he's out in the woods. He loves company of other hikers, but he also likes to be by himself sometimes too. And just when life gets him down, he gets out on the trail and he just gets pumped right back up.
And so you must have spent some nights alone in a tent. Mm-hmm. with no one around. Is that an enjoyable moment for you? Because I must say, I'm not entirely sure it is for me, and I've spent several nights like that.
Yes, actually it is, because that's kind of when Hooker Tush and the writer come together a little bit, because my actual second book, The Last Hike, was the idea came to me while I was alone in a tent in the Shenandoah National Park.
Interesting. So you're sitting there. I suppose if you're surrounded by a trail, you're thinking about the trail, mm-hmm. the trail all the time. And are you particularly, or were you when you weren't a writer when you started, were you?
No, not at all. I mean, I dabbled in it.
So are you have you become a more observant person because you're writing books? And do you notice stuff, do you think, now that other people just don't see?
I might, yeah. I mean, I tell you what, since I started writing, all I know is that in everyday situations, I don't go through the day without at least 3 or 4, well, that would make a good story, or that might actually make a good book. So things really come to me a lot more than they used to. Yeah, I think I'm more observant now.
I would think the time spent in your tent, let's face it, we spent hours in our tent, especially in lousy weather as well.
Right.
So you discovered the AT, sort of. As you say, you'd heard of it. You discovered this long trail from Georgia to Maine, and you kind of got hooked on it. What was your job at the time?
My job at the time was I was a radar technician for the U.S. Navy, a civilian one. I'd done 10 years active duty, and then I got out and became a civilian, what they call a tech rep, that helps out the guys on the ship, the sailors and stuff like that. So, fairly involved. I was living in Virginia Beach, stationed there as a civilian.
Right. And so you've got this new passion for the hike, the idea of the hike and the whole thing. How were you able to feed that new passion?
It was hard. I was about a 3-hour drive away from the closest point to the AT. So much to my wife's chagrin, we spent many 3-day weekends out in the mountains. She loves it too, but sometimes I would cancel a casino trip to go over to hike on the AT. So that's mostly how I did it then. Now it's a lot easier because in 2020 we went full-time RV life, and I still work for them, but I do it more as a technical writing thing remotely. So we can get around the AT and other trails a lot easier now.
So you say you're a full-time RV, but I'm seeing you sitting in a house right now. So that is the biggest RV I've ever seen. So
that would be a big RV. No, I'm actually at my parents' house in Texas because I'm putting my RV through an overhaul right now, which we're almost done. We're going to roll out the end of this week, but over the last month, I've been doing a lot of not really upgrades, but those things go through a lot of wear and tear. It's like putting your house through a 3.0 earthquake every time you drive it. So,
oh my gosh, really?
Yeah. So things wear out a lot easier than a normal sticks and bricks. So we've been doing a little overhaul action here, and that's why I'm in my office has got moved into my parents' house. There
you go. And so you became, in your own words, by the way, you may deny this, but you actually said you're an AT groupie. So you're finding this excitement through living vicariously through others, which a lot of people do, and I still do myself. When I see other people on trail, I kind of want to be there myself. When did the idea to do a thru-hike first come to you? Probably
around the 2017 timeframe. I'd actually, to tell you the truth, when you're talking about living vicariously through others, I discovered Dixie from Homemade Wanderlust and watched a lot of her videos. That inspired me a lot. And my youngest son and I went out for 2 weeks on the Appalachian Trail and off on some of the side trails on it. The whole trip didn't turn out quite as like we wanted to due to some health issues, but we had a great time. And that's when the thought hit me. And I was thinking maybe a 2018 thru-hike, which I'd have to take a lot of time off of work, but I was going to try and figure out how to do it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about, because you had this idea to do a thru-hike in 2018. How did your wife take to the idea of taking leave with no pay, or were you actually going to quit the job?
No, I was going to take as much leave as I had and then do the no pay thing, which meant we were going to have to save up a lot for that. My work's pretty flexible when it comes to taking time off. So, they probably would have let me do it. I never broached the subject because it didn't happen. But, yeah, she's a little scared about that. And, we were still in the sticks and bricks then. So as it came out, as it turned out, it never happened. So we didn't have to face that situation.
Right. And so you and I, as I say, we met at Trail Days this year. And as you do with a fellow hiker, we spoke about quite personal stuff. So that brings us to what happened and why you didn't go on your thru-hike. Mm-hmm. While you were preparing at the end of 2017, you started feeling unwell. How did that manifest itself in you? What were you feeling?
I was feeling very tired, low energy. I would come home from work. Sometimes in my work, I'd have to travel. And in 2017, I spent a lot of time down in the shipyard in Mississippi. And I would come back to my hotel. We'd knock off around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'd come home and I would just fall into a deep sleep, not wake up till like 9 o'clock. And then just be up for a couple hours, enough to get some food. And I'd go right back to sleep. And then that happened for several weeks, and then I started getting a little dull pain in my chest area. Right. And so
had you been to see a doctor? Had you been to see a doctor by then?
Well, what's funny is I had just turned 50, so I did my the 50 physical and got a clean bill of health, and this really? Just started out maybe a month after that. So I did go back to the doctor, and it was I'm going to tell you, it was almost a year before they finally figured out what was wrong with me.
So. But why? I would have thought it was quite easy to. We're going to talk about what the diagnosis was in a minute, but I thought it was quite easy to work that out.
You would think so, but they tried everything under the sun except in the area where I was actually sick. It's quite frustrating. Some of the doctors did their best. Some of them I thought didn't really care. But it took a while to get to the actual heart of the problem. A lot of hit and misses, basically.
And funnily enough, you say that to get to the heart of the problem, it wasn't the heart was the issue. So tell us what the diagnosis was.
Well, the diagnosis was cirrhosis of the liver.
And not what does that look like? I mean, what does that mean? What say if someone says, okay, someone tells you you've got cirrhosis of the liver, I automatically think of booze. As my brother died of booze, he had cirrhosis of the liver as well, and he died of it. So. Have you been a drinker? Are you a drinker, or have you been a drinker?
I'm an ex-sailor, so of course I was a drinker.
Yeah, silly question.
However, and you're right, most people who hear that diagnosis will automatically go to, well, he must have been an alcoholic. Surprisingly enough, I wasn't a big drinker. I was a social drinker, but I was diagnosed with non-alcoholic cirrhosis, which basically means alcohol didn't cause a problem, although alcohol didn't help the problem either.
Sure.
It ushered it along. They don't know 100%, but they think that my actual bad eating habits is what caused my cirrhosis, because you can get fat stored in your liver that can turn into cirrhosis.
Right. But you were a junk eater, were you? A junk food eater?
Yes. I ate way too much junk food in my 20s and 30s. Yeah.
So this, it's interesting to me. I didn't know this was a thing. I knew cirrhosis was what I thought cirrhosis was what I thought it was. But obviously, if it actually was specifically non-alcoholic cirrhosis, Once you have such a diagnosis, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, is a transplant the only way forward eventually?
Pretty much. I was told when I finally got to a really good doctor who could tell me all the good information, he basically said, you've got it. It's not going away. It's not curable. Eventually, a transplant's probably going to have to be your solution. And if you don't get one, when I got diagnosed the first time, I had a 5-year lifespan diagnosis.
5 years.
Yep.
Which was 2018 you got
2018,
that.
right.
So even I can do math. We're in year 5, but we're going to talk about what happens in a minute.
Okay.
So do you automatically, because I say I don't know this stuff, do you automatically go on a list or do you get points as to whether or not you're a good beneficiary of a liver? I mean, how does that work?
It's very complicated. I used to say it's more complicated than calculating astro trajectories or something like that. They have what they call a MELD score, which is it's like I can't remember the actual name of it. But anyway, it's a number that basically tells you, it takes a lot of test results, your age, and spits out a number that tells you how bad you are.
Right.
My MELD score at first was actually relatively low, even though I was still having the symptoms. And the doctor would say, look, it's not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. You're going to have all these symptoms. You're going to have no energy. You're going to have pain. You're going to get confused because your liver's not processing out ammonia, and that goes to your brain and poisons it. So here's some medicine to try and help with it.
Good Lord.
But here's the big thing. They say you have to get sicker in order to get better. That's the one thing that most people that go through this, it blows their minds when they first hear it. Basically, I didn't even qualify for a transplant list at first. I had to get a lot sicker before I could get put on the transplant list.
This is not meant to be it is a flippant question actually, but does that mean if you continued eating junk food and took up booze even more heavily, you would have got sicker quicker and higher up the list?
Yes, but they tell you every time you go to the office and get you come in probably once every couple of weeks after you get diagnosed, and they take all kinds of tests. If they ever see any alcohol in your system, they boot you. They don't treat you anymore.
But they don't see McDonald's in your system, do they?
No. But they say if you want to live long enough to have a chance at getting a liver transplant, you will change your ways.
And did you have to do that? And what were your instructions? What you had to do?
Well, first of all, no alcohol whatsoever. I've been sober for going on 5. It'll be 5 years in October. Not one drop of alcohol.
On the day you were diagnosed?
On the day I found out, I never took another drink.
Oh my God!
And it wasn't hard to stop. It was just hard in social situations where I was used to having a beer, especially after a hike. And
yes, exactly.
Who doesn't want a victory beer after a hike, right? Later on in life, or later on in a few years, I came out with this Bud Zero stuff that's totally alcohol free. So at the end of a hike, or if I was on a zero, I'd say, yep, 0 beer for a 0 day is what I would go for. But
what about food? Did you have to change your diet as well?
Yes, definitely. I had to stop eating all the crap, start eating more leafy foods. I used to say, salads were for rabbits, not for me, right? But now I'm eating more salads than I've ever had in my life. And I still have the occasional Big Mac from now and then, but nothing like I used to.
Funny enough, I'm looking at you now, man. You look very healthy. You look healthier than you did actually, even when we were side by side at Trail Days. But I'm going to come on to what happened in a minute. Obviously, that put paid to your hike, which must have been a massive disappointment because you still had the passion, didn't you?
Yes. And
so, how'd you cope with that?
It was tough at first. I got really depressed. I went from, climbing mountains to not being able to climb up the front steps to my own house. I was going to say I spiraled down in the first year and didn't do much of anything at all except, try to go to work. Actually, my work finally ended up letting me work from home. because of the situation. And I just went from that to my bed and back pretty much, and watched a bunch of hiking YouTube videos and wishing I was out there.
Oh my gosh, that must have been depressing. So how'd you get out of that slump then? Was it writing that did it for you?
Writing helped a lot. I did get the chance to sit there in front of my computer a lot more than I used to, and I had been kind of working on a book called Sawyer's Run that was inspired when I went out with my kids camping in the Shenandoah National Park at Loft Mountain. And we ran into a little bit of a how do I say this? A ranger that wasn't that polite. Now, before I go any further, I love rangers. Most rangers I've ever met are awesome and do a great job for little pay. But this guy was kind of on a power trip, and he inspired me to make a fictional tale from a real life event, which, I amped it up and made him the worst guy in the world. I mean, he was like the Hitler of Rangers. So, but
does he know? Hang on, do you think he knows who he is?
I wonder, because I don't hold back. In the book, I actually dedicated it to him and told him, "You know who you are."
The title of your book is Sawyer's Run, a mostly, in brackets, a mostly fictional Appalachian trail adventure. We obviously don't want to give it all away,
right?
But you say it's mostly fictional. Can you just give us two stories from the book, and one that's true and one that's not?
Okay, so just kind of like what I said. The story that inspired it was this ranger that came into our camp. I had my dog Sawyer with me, which inspired
Sure.
Sawyer's Run. And he was on a leash tied to the bear box. And the ranger came in, and Sawyer's kind of got this sixth sense about when someone's cool and someone's not. And he looked up and he just went, woof, like that. That's it. And this guy lost his mind. He's pulled out a thing of mace, started pointing it at my dog, and saying he was going to spray him, and he was on a leash hooked to the bear box. So he's like yelling at me, restrain your animal, restrain your animal. And that one was true, and it's in the book.
Yes.
And just inspired the whole thing. But fictionally, some of the other characters in there, well, shoot, I don't know if this is really fictionally or not, but there's a girl in the book. Her trail name is Southern Comfort. She's total fictional.
That's an interesting name.
But I actually was inspired by Dixie to create that character.
Right.
It's not her, but she inspired me to create that character. The whole book turns into a chase, and all that part is totally fictional. Some of the places we went, there's a cave we stayed in. It's actually a real cave in the Shenandoah National Park. It was an old mine, but obviously I'd never been to it. We hid out in there, stuff like that. I don't want to give too much away.
We don't want to give too much away, but how do you find your locales? Do you actually have to go and visit them because you've been on the trail? You've done quite a few miles of the trail anyway, haven't you?
Yeah, I've done a lot of section hiking from Georgia to Maryland. I haven't been any farther north than that.
And have you written north of the trail?
I did. My last hike, or my second book, The Last Hike, is about a guy with liver problems who does the whole AT. And so I did write about north, but in order to do that, I watched a lot of blogs. I looked at a lot of stuff on Far Out, or Gut Hooks, as you call it. And I did a lot of research. The south part of the book was easier because I'd been to some of the places. Yeah. The north part was a little harder.
And I think I met two of your characters, actual characters, at Trail Days as well. What did they think about being involved in it? And how did you know them?
Big
Cheese and Juggernaut, wasn't it? Big Cheese and Juggernaut,
yeah, Juggernaut and Big Cheese. Although I only called her Cheese in the book. I was doing a 1-week Triple Crown hike in Virginia, and I happened to meet up with them at Tinker's Cliff, and they were on a thru-hike that year in 2021.
Sure.
And we just got to talking, and I really hit it off with them, and and it really made a big impression on me. And when I got the idea about the book about a year later and I was writing it, I needed, these guys are like my rescuers. If I wrote myself into a corner, these guys would come in and rescue my main characters. So,
superheroes. That's awesome.
Exactly. So I reached out to them because we exchanged social media contacts, and I reached out to them before and said, do you mind if I put you guys in a book? It's going to be fictional, but it's going to be your characters. And they're like, Juggernaut was like, as long as you don't make us bad guys. And I was like, no, you're going to be good guys. Don't worry.
That's cool. I bet you have included, though, some bad guys in there in some of your books who you've actually met as well. Generally, the community we meet is a good, friendly, happy community. But sometimes we just meet people who just rub us up the wrong way or just really get under our skin, don't we?
That's true.
What did you think carefully about putting some of those people in there? Because some people probably recognize themselves. Yeah,
well, I didn't do it a lot. I mean, the Ranger in
got a Ranger.
Him. I wonder if I hope he finds it one day. But other people, actually, to tell you the truth, in the last hike, I didn't put any bad guys that I knew. So I made them all up. Yeah. Probably wouldn't want to put anybody in that I knew that I didn't really. 99% of the people I run into on the trail, like you said, are just absolutely wonderful. So it's really hard to find a guy or a girl I don't like on the trail. So yeah, not many of those in my books.
And your number eventually came up for a liver transplant. I don't know what your number. Now, did it come up because your number had risen, or did it come up because somebody matched you?
Well, what really happened is in 2021, our whole idea was to follow the AT in our RV life, and we were going up the trail. But my youngest son decided he was going to get married, and he lives in Florida, so I had to take a break, go down to Florida, and was hanging out with him during his marriage. And when we got back on the trail, we had met a trail family at trail days in Damascus that year. And we were kind of following them along, being trail angels for them. And then when we had a detour down, we lost them. And we're like, they were back up near Massachusetts by the time we got back on the road. So we shot up to near Dalton, Massachusetts to stay for a couple of weeks. And I had taken a blood test before I left Florida to send to my doctor. And I had an MRI actually. And the day after I got up to Massachusetts and I was going to start hiking on the trail, they called me and told me I had cancer in my liver. So that's an unfortunate side effect to cirrhosis, but it's actually, for me, was a silver lining, because when you get cancer in your liver, you automatically get a bunch of points added to your score. It's not quite as easy as that. You got to go through a few things. But that's what jumped it up. That's what got me on the list. But
you said this was in 21.
Yeah, it takes a while.
Wow. So that must have been a real worrying time, because you think you're managing it the best way you can, improving your lifestyle, but until you get a transplant, you're not going to be done. Now you get yourself a cancer diagnosis. How long did it take you to actually get the transplant?
It was probably another year.
And did you deteriorate over that period of time?
I did. I hate to say this because I always feel like I'm like being, melodramatic, but it was the end game when the liver came through. I knew I didn't have much time left, and once the liver transplant was done, and they got to look at the old one, they're like, "Yeah, you didn't have much time left, bub."
Good Lord. They don't show it to you, do they?
Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I have a picture of the old one and the new one side by side. My wife made that up for me.
That will not be in the show notes. So what was it like after the operation? Is it an immediate improvement? Because we actually met in May, so that was probably only about 5 or 6 months after the operation.
Yeah, I had it in December of 2022, and then we met in May. Well, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. First of all, your energy comes back to you almost immediately. When I woke from the operation, I could already feel that I was suffused with energy.
And
it makes you want to get up and start doing stuff right away, which they want you to do as far as walking around and stuff like that. But they don't want you to take it, too far. There's a lot of rules and restrictions on you especially for the first 3 months. That's a critical time.
Sure.
And it's really hard to hold back. And then even when they do let you loose, even though you got all that energy, your stamina is not up because you've been laying around in a bed for the last years.
Of course, yeah.
So that's the biggest challenge is matching that newfound energy and getting the stamina built back up.
And because it was a non-alcoholic liver you had, cirrhosis you had,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying because you said you've been clean 5 years ago. Could you have started drinking again without any real problem?
Nope. And I tell you that right away. It's too critical of when you get a new organ, your body doesn't want it. It wants to get rid of it because it knows that's not my organ, right?
Sure.
So you're on a host of drugs, anti-rejection drugs that stave off your body trying to reject that new organ. It's a very balanced thing. I'm constantly having to have blood tests and having my medicines changed up and down until you get to a certain point where it's going to stabilize out. It's getting a lot better now. It's about 7 months after.
Yeah.
But they're still doing some adjustments. And any alcohol introduced into that new liver can cause it to reject right away.
Right. Everybody who listens to this knows I ask the dumb questions deliberately. I know anybody who drinks will be thinking that straight away. Well, can I have a drink now?
I was thinking that. Before I could even ask, they told me, "Yeah, you will never drink again."
So you mentioned now that you RV. Is that feeding your wanderlust, or
yes.
is this as much as it can be, or is there a future hike in you at some stage? You think? I mean, a longer distance hike.
Okay, so yes, to answer your first part, the wanderlust is definitely fed by the RV life. Now, because of the transplant and being on the list, we were stuck in Dallas, Texas, because that's where I had the transplant done. It's where a lot of my family is. So I needed the support network. My wife couldn't. She was great at supporting me, but she needed help too. So, kudos to her and my family for stepping up and providing all that support. So we were stuck in Dallas for about a year and a half. So stuck in one place. I was not allowed to drive anywhere or travel anywhere 4 hours away from the hospital, because when you get a transplant, it's not something planned long term. You get a phone call, you get down there, and you get it done. So we are basically just now getting back on the road. I went back to Virginia for the last 3 months of my post care to go back to my original doctor, and also so I could be near the Appalachian Trail because I missed it so much.
I bet.
And I came down to trail days from there. So, but even then we weren't really doing a lot. And now with the overhaul, we're getting ready to head out to Colorado next week and check out some of the trails in the western part of the United States.
Nice. You know what? I'm so pleased we met. I'm so pleased you come on the show to share your story. I think it's a great example of someone having a terrible diagnosis and yet managing it the best you possibly can. And the fact that you're now thinking of hiking again, it's just wonderful that you're healthy. You look healthy, as I say. And I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story with us.
Oh, it's been an honor. I'm so glad. Thank you for having me.
Well, stay in touch, okay, buddy? And we'll speak soon.
Okay, sure will, man.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
Tush, you've got to admit, that is an awesome name. And when we spoke back in May at Trail Days, Lee still had a slightly yellow pallor to him, but when we recorded, he looked great. He may never do a thru-hike, but his stories through his books keep him connected to the trail in an unusual, yet just as powerful way. And his determination to get back out there was pretty inspirational, I thought, given that he'd almost given up hope before his transplant. Nice to know that there's always hope. And I also wanted to let you know that the cover of Lee's book, Sawyer's Run, was designed and drawn by our mutual, now sadly deceased friend, Gabe Burkhart. Gabe was a very early guest on the show, and he died a couple of years ago while out on a hike. Sadly missed, but a fine artist, and he connected both me and Lee. Now Mary, and she called me this Monday morning from a very special spot on the trail. Here she is. By the way, I deliberately left in some of Mary's background noise for a very good reason.
Oh, Steve.
Hey Mary, where are you then?
I am on top of Katahdin. Oh my gosh. I can just scream.
That is
I can just scream.
That is so fantastic. First off, congratulations. You've been amazing.
Oh my God.
The whole year. You're emotional, aren't you?
Oh, well, I thought I would be more emotional. I haven't cried,
right.
But I'm just so excited.
So what was it like? Excited. What was it like kicking your heels for a couple of days?
It was good for me.
Was it really?
It was. I was just so broken after that 100-mile wilderness. When I finally got to Katahdin Stream and I was excited because seeing people, coming back down because it was late in the day, and their excitement, I was like, oh gosh, I really don't want to take time off.
Yeah,
I'm so glad I did because I just needed the rest. I was really just worn out.
And so you came in. So your family came up with you. Who came up with you?
My daughter and my son.
Right.
And you know what today is? Today is day 221.
Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be?
And with the weather, the flight delays, the rerouting of their flights, and one came from Atlanta and one from Tampa,
right.
And they both ended up flying into Portland. So I drove to Portland to get them, and everything just fell into place, and it just worked out perfect.
So take us through the day. Tell us what happened.
This morning, woke up at 4 o'clock, got ready to leave. I wanted to be at that gate right at 6 o'clock, and we were.
Yeah.
We had a parking pass, so that all worked out with no problem.
Nice.
And talked to the park ranger, got my little slip.
What number are you?
What
number are you?
Oh my gosh, I didn't even look. I really did. Honestly, I didn't look at it.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But you do get a number. Anyway, so you set off. And those early, mile and a half, are pretty easy, aren't they?
They are. And it's like, okay, we better, really pick up the pace here because it's going to slow us down. I knew that we'd have some incline. And,
sure.
And my kids, they're physically fit, but, they haven't hiked 2,200 miles.
That's right. That's exactly it.
But surprisingly, they did well. We made it here in 5 hours, and we stopped and had lunch and
awesome.
Chatted with other people, and just an enjoyable hike.
What's the weather like up there?
It's cloudy, but a little bit of sun coming out, cool. So the weather was just perfect.
Mary, I've just got to ask you though, that moment you get above tree line, you're faced with this rock wall. What did you think when you first saw that?
Oh my gosh. It was like, oh, not again. Not enough. the fear of the White Mountains came rushing back to me. Yeah, that's a bit daunting, that looking at that rock face.
But it's you know what, you now know what it. We've often talked on the show about going up Katahdin when it's the end of your hike, as opposed to just climbing Katahdin at some stage of your life. Climbing up Katahdin after 2,200 miles, after 220 days, it is a different thing, isn't it? That whole epic feeling is so wonderful.
It is. I honestly cannot believe I'm here.
Yeah,
it's so surreal. The fact that starting and going through everything we went through, along the journey,
sure.
It's like, here it is.
Yeah. It's so worth it. By the way, the important thing is, did you do a pose? Were you ready with your pose?
I was ready with my post.
Excellent. I
I
hope
had to, of course, do a superhero.
I hope you. Well, you are a superhero. I hope you're going to send me a picture of that superhero pose so we can actually put it in the show notes. Look,
yes.
it's been an incredible journey to follow along with you. You're kind of matter of fact about a lot of things that been on this hike, but when you go to sleep at night that you're a through hiker now, and no one's ever going to be able to take that away from you, and it's always in doubt until you actually get there, isn't it? And you've just done just amazingly well, and I'm so pleased that we were able to follow you along that journey. But what I would say, this is going to sink into you more and more in the next month or two, so I'd like to be able to come back to you in about 2 months' time just to see how you feel about it then, because giving it a bit of time and distance in your mind, you'll get more things out of it, I promise you, as time goes on. So, at the moment, all I say is just enjoy the journey that you've taken. Enjoy the fact that you're up there with family, which is terrific for you, I'm sure. And we're so proud that you're able to do it and that you reached out and we were able to record you from the top.
It was quite an honor to be part of your class, Steve. I enjoyed looking forward to our recordings and hearing all the other stories and just being part of your podcast was just amazing.
Well,
it really helped me along the trail, just have something to focus on and to look forward to. And that's really important, having that support from friends, family, and from you. It just made my trip that much more enjoyable.
Well, I must say, I appreciate you saying that, and I'm glad that, because I'm sure for some people think, oh my God, I'll speak to that bloke again. I could do without that, but you've always been happy to speak to me, which is great. So let's do that, shall we? When you send me the picture, enjoy this celebration with your family. Be careful on the way down. Always.
Yes.
Yeah. And just get down safely. And I'm so proud of you and so pleased we were able to be part of your journey.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you so much, Steve.
Okay.
Good talking to you.
And you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. How about that? I'm adding a Katahdin picture to the show notes, and she joins Mark Carpenter as our second through hiker this year. Though Steve Noter, of course, completed his hike from last year. That background noise included other hiker celebrations, and I hope you heard the sheer amount of giddy delight, especially actually Mary's voice and some of those up there at the Brown sign. It is such a special place, and it has that effect, that power upon us to just celebrate. It's just a remarkable place. I reached out to Mary this morning to find out how her descent from the top went, and she let me know that they went down the payable trail, taking just 3 hours without any issues. She also said that she's home safely now after a 22-hour car drive. So she's back with Wiley. What a great story she shared with us all. Before we move on, I've got a couple of giveaways this week. One of our guests on the show, Chris Vasey, or Idaho Bones, who was our guest on episode 322 in May last year. Chris has published the memoir of his journey on the AT. It's called Uncivilized, and Chris sent me a few copies to give away to my listeners. I'm keeping one of the hardback copies, but I've got another hardback and 3 paperbacks to send out to you all. To win one, you need to head over to the hikingradionetwork.com website, find my podcast, and click on the microphone in the bottom right-hand corner of the page. There, you can record a message to me, no more than 2 minutes long, but with your suggestion for my 400th show coming up in November. The ones that I like the best, I'll send out a copy of Chris's book to you. So don't forget to leave me your address as well. I hope to hear from some of you. Now let's hear from Jessica, who we didn't hear from last week.
Hello.
Hey Jessica, Steve, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. And we didn't speak to you last week. I'm not terribly sure what happened there. But firstly, are you safe? I mean, how are you doing?
I am safe. I'm doing just fine.
Right. And you sent me a couple of notes, and one of which you said you underestimated Maine. How could you possibly underestimate Maine?
I don't know, but I did.
I
figured once we got through New Hampshire, there might be some tough climbs, but we'd be through the hardest part and on our way, and boy, was I wrong.
Well, I think you threw the hardest part, aren't you? I think New Hampshire's more difficult than Maine, I think, but I think Maine is more epic and more dramatic in my mind. And you said that the mud is endless. So does it mean it's still raining there, or what's going on?
Yeah, I mean it's been raining off and on, and I think everything's just still so saturated from everything that went on earlier in the summer that like some places just haven't dried up at all. So you're still like slogging through the mud. I had to buy new shoes in Rangeley. I don't think they were on trail for 10 minutes before they were mud colored,
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. And I think you said last time that you actually spent a day in a hut. You spent another day in a shelter, didn't you?
Yeah. So the hurricane, I guess it was Hurricane Lee, was, as far as we could tell, was supposed to get fairly close. We were 2 or 3 days into a 4 or 5 day stint, and again, with how saturated everything is and the fact that the leaves are still on the trees, I've seen this happen before in New England, that you get hurricane force winds and you end up with trees down all over the place because with the leaves still on, they just get pushed over. So we decided to play it safe, and we ended up zeroing in a shelter the day that it came through. Luckily, there wasn't a lot of rain, but there was definitely a lot of wind. And there ended up being 4 of us in the shelter that decided to stay put. And part of the reason was because there wasn't another shelter between where we were and the next road crossing where we could get out. And it was still, I think, somewhere between 10 or 15 miles to go.
So you would have had to walk quite a way to get out then, no?
Yeah, and over the Crockers and, so being up high and all that. So 4 of us ended up just staying put for the day. Like I said, we didn't get a terrible amount of rain, but the wind really picked up. And then just before sunset, it really picked up. It was kind of scary. I had to go to the privy, and I was like listening to all the cracking going on and stuff. And that day there was a guy who decided to go that was like 7 miles from where we were to the shelter before the one we were staying at, and he decided to go for it just to at least get that far that day. And he said he heard breaking branches and falling trees all over the place during the day.
Wow, frightening. So what did you do in the shelter? Let's face it, it's not exactly a hive of activity place, is it? So what were you doing? Just sleeping and reading and playing cards, or what?
Sleeping, listening to things on my phone, trying to check the weather forecast when we could, and most of all, trying not to eat everything in your food bag.
That's a long day, though, isn't it, to be just stuck in a shelter? Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, like, I like camping, so it's kind of like camping, but the biggest problem was, like, is a tree going to fall and hit the shelter? And
there's that,
am I going to eat more than I should so that we don't have enough food to get out of here? Like, so it's not the most restful thing in the world, but, it also gives you an opportunity to let the sore muscles and joints have a moment, I guess.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing. Yeah. And resting is never bad for you anyway. I guess it's just the boredom thing, to be stuck in the shelter all day long. Nightmare. You say also that you still haven't seen a moose, but you've heard one.
Yeah, so we were at this Crocker Cirque campsite a couple of nights ago, and it's basically kind of this glacial bowl right near the Crockers, and there's a little bit of a pond near the campsite, and it was getting dark, and there were a couple other people there with us, and we were getting ready for bed, and we heard this very odd moaning sound in the woods, and none of us really knew what it was, and we were kind of like, yeah, all right, that's weird. And the next morning, one of the people that was camped with us, he's like, I managed to get a call out to my dad, who knows things about this stuff, and apparently it was a lovesick female moose letting herself be known. So we heard the noise during the night a couple of times too, and we never saw the moose, but apparently the rut has begun. And
there you go.
It is that time in Maine, so it does kind of make sense.
You don't want to get too close to one in that case then. But are you sure it wasn't a loon? Because loons make that plaintive sort of cry, don't they?
Definitely not a loon. I'm very familiar with loon sounds.
Right, okay.
It was definitely not a loon. Yeah, and unfortunately that pond was really not like anything that loons would be able to survive in. It was kind of shallow and muddy. And,
sure.
Yeah.
So how far are you from Katahdin now then? Because I know you're going to cross the Kennebec soon, eventually, in a couple of days' time. But how far is that from Katahdin, do you know?
I don't honestly know. I think we're somewhere under 200 miles at this point.
Right. Okay. Well, you would be, I suppose, being in Maine. Yeah. Yeah. And how is it? What's the atmosphere? Are people getting excited? I mean, you're now September 19th, so you're probably going to be another week and a half, 2 weeks to Katahdin, I suspect. Maybe a bit less than that. What do you feel like? Are you feeling good?
Me personally, the clock's ticking. The weather's weird. I'm just concerned about getting there before some weather event shuts things down.
There's no reason to think it will do, though, in the next two. I mean, it might be cold, it might be rainy, but they probably won't close it. I suspect not. You know, you've just got to get there. Once you've got there, then you can breathe a bit, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing. And of course, the reason why we flipped in the first place. And I've sort of been questioning, like, should we have just gone straight to Katahdin and headed south? But, you know, getting through the Whites in August, I think, was a very good idea.
Yes,
And again, my familiarity with that area, I knew that was definitely going to be a factor. But, we just got to get there.
So in retrospect, do you think it was the right call to do, what you did?
I won't know until we get to Katahdin, will I?
And is the plan to go straight south again?
So once we've finished Katahdin, the plan is to go back to Hanover, New Hampshire, and then head south. Yeah.
Right. Okay, cool. Very cool. Well, look, you know, it's been quite the journey for you, I know, and it's been something that must have tested all your patience and your nerve the whole time. But you're still going. You're one of the few still going. So fantastic, you know, effort that you're still doing it. Do you still have that same "I'm going to do this bloody thing" mentality?
It's wavering a bit.
Oh, is it really?
I'm looking at the clock and the time I have, and quite honestly, I've been out here over 6 months at this point. September is 6 months, so time's a wasting to some degree, and I'm starting to figure out what I'm doing after all this is done. So I do have a bit of a timeline at this point. So
right. What about Mike? Is he going to go south, or is it dependent upon what you do? Because you've been a team for a long time now, haven't you?
Yeah. Mike is the most determined person I think I've probably ever met in my life. Mike is going to finish this trail one way or another. And considering how beaten up physically he's gotten, the fact that he's still going is amazing, and gives me reason to keep going too. So
that's great. You sometimes need that. There are times if you're by yourself, you sit alone in your tent thinking, why am I doing this? It'd be so easy for me to go home. Then you think you've got that other person. I mean, I vacillate between whether it's good to be with somebody and not good to be with somebody. There's good reasons to be by yourself, and there are good reasons to be with somebody. And, I suppose it depends upon your mood at the time as to whether or not you want to be with somebody in terms of, hiking with them. And I'm sure it sounds to me anyway, from what you've said, that the two of you have been pushing each other on, which is a really helpful thing, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, enjoy the rest of the trip. I know you're going across the Kennebec, which is just an exciting little adventure to do as well. Make sure you get there in time in the morning as well. And also make sure you have the all-you-can-eat pancakes just before there. Very important to do that.
Mike's definitely got his sights set on that one, so I don't think we're going to miss that.
Okay. All right, Jessica. Well, you take it easy, okay? And we'll speak soon.
All righty.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.
I'm never sure how Jessica's really feeling when I call her. This has been such an emotional roller coaster for her, and that response as to whether or not she's going to complete the trail was more than a touch delayed. She's having doubts, though. To be fair, this isn't the first time she's had doubts. As we said, there are pluses and minuses of hiking with a partner. But for Jessica, and for Mike, I'm sure, they seem to need their partner to keep each other going. I hope that continues all the way to the end. Actually, I've got something else to tell you all. Just yesterday, I purchased my ticket for my trip to the UK next April to do the South West Coast Path. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I've been, frankly, humming and hawing whether or not I think I could do it. It's over 600 miles, so it's a proper walk, and I've decided to podcast twice a week on a Monday morning as well as our normal Thursday morning. I hope you follow along and get some impression of what the trail's like when I'm out there. I'm very excited, I tell you. Now here's Joanne, who seems supremely comfortable with a very singular hike as she passes through the Virginia Triple Crown, heading south. Here she is.
Good morning, Steve.
Hey Joanne, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
You're always positive when you answer the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. What's to be sad about? Eh? Oh, fantastic.
I like to be in the woods.
Yeah, there you are. It kind of works, doesn't it? So I know you've done the Triple Crown, because I know you were coming out to it last time. So let's go through them bit by bit, because I love that part of the country, and it's a beautiful hike, those miles which take in everything. So you actually went obviously to Tinker Cliffs first, didn't you?
Yes.
So where did you stay then? Because you said you had sunrise at McAfee Knob, so you must have stayed overnight after Tinker Cliffs?
I did. I came out of Daleville and did the whole ridge around Carvin's Cove Reservoir.
Okay.
And then did Tinker Cliffs, and then stopped at
Lambert Meadow, is it?
Campbell.
I thought it was Lambert.
Campbell Shelter,
is it?
right before McAfee Knob.
Oh, right. Okay. So tell us about Tinker Cliffs first. It's one of the underplayed spots.
Yeah. The views from there are gorgeous.
They
I didn't
are.
know if there was like one specific knob that was Tinker Cliffs or what it was, but I met people up there and they explained that's probably the whole ridge. And
yes. Yeah.
And then they said, and I said, okay, so I'm going to do McAfee Knob for sunrise. And they're like, yeah, it's right over there. I'm like, what?
Yes, that's right. It's wonderful to see, isn't it?
Yeah, from Tinker Cliffs, the view fascinated me because McAfee Knob is like the head of a little ridge that goes serpentine up through this valley. Mm-hmm. It was just gorgeous. And I liked the build up to Tinker Cliffs too, because there's all these little rock knobs. Yeah. And it was 3 miles before Tinker Cliffs. I keep putting the S in the wrong place. Yeah. I saw that I was coming to this little rock opening, and everywhere there's a rock, there's a little path to it.
Yes, of course.
And this one was close to the trail. And I look up, and there's a black vulture sitting right there on the rock in the opening.
Maybe you're looking worse than you think you are.
So I stopped dead in my tracks, and he turns around and looks at me, and we eyeballed each other, and he just stayed. And I snuck 4 steps closer, but I didn't sneak because I know he knows where I was.
Yes, yes.
I took pictures. I watched him. The sun came out and he spread his wings to soak up the sun. Wow. And I got so many great pictures. And I was there at least 5 minutes, and he was still there when I left and walked down the trail.
They're so used to people, aren't they, Joanne? You know, it's funny, actually. I think the encountering nature in the wild is a bit of a surprise to me when it first happened. But you not supposed to get used to it, because I don't think you ever get used to these fantastic sights.
No.
But it's part of the landscape, isn't it?
It is. And when you're in the woods this long, it's such a privilege to be able to have these moments, because if you're just passing through, a lot of times you don't.
Sure. And they're part of it. We are part of their landscape as well, aren't we? You know, there is so much, the trail goes through so much nature. They can see us and we can see them. And
yeah.
It's a lovely, I love that interconnectivity. And the fact that you actually looked directly at him and he looked directly at you is pretty special as well.
Yeah. I felt like he knew I wouldn't hurt him.
Yes.
He didn't. Yes. He just stayed. It was amazing.
But you weren't so sure, though. He wouldn't hurt you. So after Tinker Cliffs, you stayed the night at the shelter. I always thought it was Lambert's Meadow Shelter for some reason. Maybe not. So obviously not. And then how far short of McAfee Knob were you? Because you said you went up Sunrise.
0.6
miles. Perfect. So you got up about what, 4:30, 5?
I think 5.
Right. So tell us about it. It's great. I love seeing it at sunrise. It's phenomenal, isn't it?
It is. I got up there and I got to the first outcropping and I couldn't see the point. I'm like, well, where is it? And a day hiker came up and he's like, I saw some people going over there. So we backtracked from his perspective, backtracked a little bit, and I saw the blue arrow. I didn't realize it was a little blue arrow trail.
Right.
And got out there, and there was just one other couple sitting further up on the rock. And it was purple. Like sometimes the fascinating colors are actually before sunrise.
Yes, definitely.
So it was purple, and I got my picture of sitting with my feet dangling in the purple light.
Oh, did you? You dangled your feet. Good for you.
Oh, yeah. I almost didn't even sit up straight. Like, it's so scary to...
It's kind of weird. It's not as bad as it looks, though, is it? Once you're out there, it's not as bad as it looks. I don't think so, anyway.
Well, the big rock, like, that's big enough to have a party on. But dangling your feet over is just like...
You got to do it.
It does scare me. It makes my stomach very weird.
You got to do it though. I'm glad you did. It's a special place, a special moment as well. It's one of those iconic spots that you've got a picture now forever. But the pictures that's actually going to be in your mind and burned on your retina. That's the one that you're going to hold with you forever because it's just such a beautiful spot. So you then head down. You go past another shelter. Then you hit the road. Did you go straight onto Dragon's Tooth after that?
I did. I passed a couple shelters, went right up to Dragon's Tooth. I thought I would make it to the shelter space on the other side of Dragon's Tooth, but it was tough getting up to Dragon's Tooth. I'm like, geez, am I back in New Hampshire or southern Maine?
That is a horrendous climb down when you're going northbound. I must say, that was one of my big shocks early on, was coming down from Dragon's Tooth. So did you actually go up the tooth?
Oh, no.
Oh, you should have done.
I looked at it and I was by myself. So I looked at it like, I don't even see how I would really go up this. And I was like, no way. If somebody was there with me, I would have looked at it a little bit closer, but I'm like, no. And I was tired and I was carrying water because I had to. And I just enjoyed the view very much. Those are epic rocks up there.
They are. It's quite a hike down from there, isn't it? Because going northbound up towards Dragon's Tooth, that was exhausting for me. Even though it wasn't incredibly steep, it was just endlessly up. So it must have been down for you.
And it's exhausting going down too. But I got part way and found a good place to set up my tent, so it worked out well.
So you're still by yourself most of the time?
Yeah.
And you're good with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I like it.
But you seen people on the trail? Because there must be other southbounders, mustn't there?
There is. I know I saw Fresh Ground this morning at the hostel.
Nice.
He came in to shower and he had said he had already fed the 12 or so southbounders that are coming into Pearisburg tonight.
Right.
And then I know there's some flip-floppers right ahead of me, some I had been hoping to catch again.
Right.
They were at the hostel the night before me, so I'm almost to them. And I never thought I would, but I think I'm going to hostel hop for a little bit.
Oh, right.
Since they're so close together and just experience that because I've not done that yet.
Don't miss Woods Hole. It's
that's
real...
tonight.
Oh, you are going to Woods Hole tonight? That's such a special place. I'm so pleased you are, because have you actually booked?
Yep.
All right. Where are you going to stay?
I don't know. I just asked for bunk.
All right. Okay, fine. Yeah, the bunkhouse. That's great. It's just a great place. And I'll tell you, say hi to Neville for me. Give her a kiss for me because she's awesome. But now the last of the notes you sent, which is quite a surprising one, you're looking forward to the Springer beginning and terminus sign. So you've made that thought in your mind, have you? Because it's unrealistic when you start this hike. You know, it's 2,000 miles away, but now you're getting there. You're now 700 miles away, I guess, about 700 miles.
Yeah, just under 700, I think.
And thoughts are turning
under 700.
Yeah, all right, of course it is, just right. And thoughts are turning to Springer now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had some moments, and I'm like, oh, there's that plaque on the rock, but that's my sign. So, the sign on Katahdin is just so epic, and I did some ugly crying up there. But I need my ending to be epic. And how is that going to feel to me? So I was thinking, well, there's going to be, I think about a mile before it. You can help me with this. A mile before it, the approach trail is going to come in.
Well, no, 0.9 of a mile, you go through a parking lot, which is where some people do. When you're going southbound, you're going to hit the parking lot. Then there's a road, and people drive up to there to avoid the approach trail. The approach trail isn't there at all. The approach trail is on the other side of Springer. So what happens is you'll go across the parking lot, then you walk up what I always call the scrubby little path up to Springer. But hang on, let me tell you, everybody who's done this hike, who's finished at Springer, found it an epic for themselves as well, because it is the culmination of that period of time. You haven't got the sign, you haven't got the brown sign to climb on, but you've got the Springer terminus sign, and you're going to be at the top of a mountain and see great views of Alana. And, I think you're still going to be happy with it because it is the end of your journey, and the fact that you don't finish at Katahdin doesn't matter at all, really. It's one of those things. If I ever did it again, which I probably won't, but if I ever did it again, I'd probably still go northbound and want to finish at Katahdin. But finish at Springer, you're going to feel great. And the people I have spoken to have done this all feel great about it. So don't worry about that. I think you'll have fun. And frankly, you got 700 miles to think about it. So
I can build up my expectations, right? And I was thinking, I have to figure out a pose I want to do. I might be there by myself. So how am I going to do that? And they have a book too, right? That I'll be able to They do. You can write record
in the book,
myself in I was here. And I think that blaze, the first blaze, there's a first blaze, right?
There is.
So that too is going to be I got to touch that blaze.
And that blaze was the one, I actually banged my head at the top of Springer when I started before I even passed the first blaze, which was yards away. It was so pathetic, I can't tell you. And I had a huge, because I had shaved my head bald because I was the Mighty Blue thing. I had a bump the size of an egg on my head straight away. It's ridiculous.
That's too funny.
I was never going to make it. Anybody who met me that night must have thought this silly old fool ain't going to make it.
Well, I can relate. I hit my head yesterday.
Oh, did you?
It was raining. Yes, it was raining, and I had my ball cap on, which I don't usually wear. Right. And I had it down, and I'm looking down at my feet, and there was a big old branch that had come down a long time ago because all the little stuff was gone from it. Wow. But just two little fingers of it hung at head height, and I ran my head right into it.
Oh, dear. Nasty.
Made my eyes water.
I bet it did. It could have been worse. So, it's the way it is. But look, I'm pleased you're starting to think of Springer now, and you I don't know how you'd pose. You'd probably sit there, I suspect, and do a selfie and lean back or something like that. But if there's someone up there, they'll take a picture of you, obviously. And you never know. 700 miles, you may catch up with some people and you may carry on hiking together. And that's all part of it. You've been very flexible with your trip. So as you continue to be flexible, things may change. Yeah,
I think it would be fun to be there with somebody.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Just to have that conversation.
Sure. Yeah, it's important. These are important times. All these, all you guys coming to an end, and some still going. These are just great times, and I love hearing about your adventures. But look, good to catch up again. And we'll catch up again next week, and keep on trucking and enjoy Woods Hole. I'm sure you will.
Okay, thank you. Sure thing, and I'll say hi for you.
Yeah. Cheers then.
All right. Cheers. Bye bye.
Isn't that funny? She's already thinking of Springer. I'm wondering if it's going to be the epic finish that she wants. I know I make fun of that scrubby little path, but really, it's going to be the conclusion of her hike. And that's been epic. I'm sure as she stands by the sign, she'll have that maelstrom of emotions that many of us get at the end of our path. We don't always emote the way we think we will. And then, of course, she's going to be a thru-hiker. And that's all that's going to matter. Thanks to our donors this week, recurring monthly supporters Suzanne Johnson, Michael Garsh, Betty McInerney, Sean Dead-Wiley, Anne Pickin, Sharon James, Emmanuel Bravo-Ramos and Kevin Weidman have all stuck with us. While Lisa Kaplan also made a very generous donation, saying, "Hi Steve, I love your podcast and have recently caught up. Without doubt, I've been bitten by the AT bug. I became interested after meeting a couple of thru-hikers and giving them a ride. I plan to be a future thru-hiker." It gets you that way, doesn't it, Lisa? Thanks to you all for keeping the show on the road. We've actually got a brand new podcast coming in a couple of weeks for you to enjoy, but I'm going to save the news about that for now. Finally, George Stefanos is getting close to the end, but he mentions in today's episode that he's getting close to the Kennebec. I don't believe they had a canoe back then. I'm looking forward to see how he crosses it. I'll see you next week. Friday the 16th of September, 1983, mile 1898.9. I need an extremely big day tomorrow, or I will have no choice but to stop in Rangeley. I settled for 9 big miles today, calling it quits at 2:30. A series of small and large problems put a premature end to my hike, not to mention a beautiful shelter location at which I could not resist spending the night. Last night was chilly, but not bitterly cold like the preceding few nights. I woke at 6:15 and was on the trail by 7:45. I felt reasonably well, but a couple of minor ailments which had been plaguing me lately were acting up. One problem was my right big toe. Those constant steep descents in the Mahoosics had begun tearing the nail from that toe for the second time since Pennsylvania, and the subsequent even more rugged descents are finishing the job. The nail is in that troublesome phase right now, where it's constantly flopping around, catching on my sock and hurting like hell, but not far enough advanced in falling off that I can rip it the rest of the way and have done with it. I can hardly wait for that moment. The second problem was a sore tendon behind my right knee. Both injuries are annoying, but nothing I can't handle. What did slow me down today was the absolute ruggedness of the Appalachian Trail over the initial 6 miles. The descent into Sawyer Notch from Hall Mountain was long and steep, threading along a crumbling footway. The trail crossed a gravel lumber road and Sawyer Brook in that narrow, wooded valley, and the real mess began. Moody Mountain goes down beside Pond Mountain in Tennessee at the top of my list of the mountains from hell on the Appalachian Trail. The climb up from Sawyer Brook was unrelenting torture. Towards the top, the AT scaled up the face of some steep cliffs. At one point, because it looked identical to the rest of the trail, I strayed off the trail and followed a shallow rocky gully straight up the cliffs to a dead end at a sheer rock face. It is just possible that I whimpered slightly when I discovered I would have to climb all the way back down that gully to find the actual trail route, but I probably imagined it. Mean and macho guys like me do not whimper. There were nice views back down into Sawyer Notch and across to Hall Mountain from the top of the cliffs, but no sweeping vistas. Nevertheless, some erosion control and perhaps a few switchbacks were all that was required to make Moody Mountain a worthwhile trip. Perhaps, once all their trail and shelter construction is completed, the MATC can get around to improving their existing trail. The trail down the other side of Moody was a slight improvement over the ascent until a dizzying half-mile, 800-foot drop at the end into Black Brook Notch. The 2.5 miles that shot straight up and then straight down Moody Mountain destroyed me for the remainder of the day. The Appalachian Trail forded the knee-deep waters of Black Brook just before crossing Main 5. I'm growing fond of the Main attitude towards water crossings. No effete wooden bridges or crap like that here. Real backpackers take their shoes and socks off and get their feet wet. I'm looking forward to the Kennebec River crossing on the trail up ahead. The bottom half of the trail up Old Blue Mountain was an instant replay of the ascent of Moody, mirroring it even to the point where I again missed a turning of the path and followed a steep, shallow gully a couple of 100 feet up the face of the cliffs. Near the top of Old Blue, the AT levelled off to a steep, but sane, climb over some knobs to the open 3,600-foot summit, where there were partially obstructed 360-degree views. The best vista was looking southward, where Moody Mountain sneered at me across the notch as Baldpate glowered in the distance. By this point, I was just plain used up. The 6 miles from Hall Mountain lean-to Old Blue's summit had chewed up almost 5 hours. The soles of my boots had begun peeling again, flopping around beneath my feet as I tried to walk. Clouds were moving in as the day progressed. It had turned into another hazy, overcast day on the Appalachian Trail, but the air remained quite cold. Tonight was shaping up to be an unpleasant night to pitch a tent, and I had no shot at reaching any shelters past Elephant Mountain Lean-To. I made much better time over the final 3 miles to the shelter, but I set no world records. It took me 1 hour and 45 minutes. The trail was relatively level, but my legs were spent, and that was about as fast as I could move. I guess I could have plodded onward for another 5 or 6 miles without dropping, but there didn't seem to be any point to the exercise. Rain was coming, and the next shelter was almost 12 miles away. The lean-to at which I'm spending the night is in an airy forest of red spruce along the lower slopes of Elephant Mountain. Not a square foot of flat ground can be seen. The forest floor is a jumble of humps and hummocks, strewn with moss-covered rocks and blowdowns. The only undergrowth is the ubiquitous moss and profusion of brilliantly green ferns. It's a forest which possesses an aura of antiquity. The spruce are old, big shaggy giants whose scarred, scaly trunks droop threads of stringy moss clumped into thick grey beards. A deep coating of dead needles preserves the sacred silence of this ancient sylvan temple as I wander about. A perfect miniature boreal bog sits below the shelter. I would have been tempted to stay there, even if I had a reasonable chance of reaching the next shelter. As soon as I arrived, I changed out of my hiking boots and re-glued their soles, using a tube of glue which the cobbler who repaired them in Vermont had donated. It should really have 24 hours to set, but I can only hope that the soles will hold tomorrow morning. I have one final shot at making Stratton before my food runs out. Main Route 4, the shortest hitch to Rangeley, is 21 miles away. A shelter is located 1.5 miles past that road crossing. If I can make it to that shelter tomorrow, I will go on straight ahead towards Stratton. If not, I will hitchhike into Rangeley, get a room and purchase some more food before I continue. I think I can reach that shelter if my boots hold up. There's a short climb to the crest of the Bemis Range, followed by a series of knobs and a great deal of descent to Main Highway 17. After that crossing, only 13 miles of flat lake country stand between me and Main 4. I hope to carry off the big day tomorrow. My ego is in serious need of a boost. In these rugged mountains of western Maine, I've covered about 57 miles in the 5 days since I resumed backpacking. Saturday, the 17th September 1983, mile 1906.8. Anybody who has read the rest of this book will know I have no reason to love mice. They've eaten my food, ruined my sleep, and made some of my nights miserable. A combination of the mice in Low Gap Shelter in Georgia and my own carelessness almost put an end to this quest when it was barely getting underway. Another rotten little rodent kept waking me up last night. On one occasion, the brazen little ran directly across my head while I was sleeping. Another time, he fell from my food sack, which was hanging from the shelter's roof, and landed on the floor with a resounding thud. He had crawled down the string of my stuff sack and gnawed his way through the nylon fabric. When I awoke for the 10th time to the sound of him rustling through my food, I was in no mood to be merciful. I took the bag down, untied it, and opened it up, determined to commit a rodent homicide. My nemesis emerged from inside the bag and began to dash around in circles on top of it, too scared to think straight and try to run away. I began to feel sorry for him, right in the middle of a right cross, which would have caved in his miserable skull. He looked so tiny and helpless, and cute, damn it. Somehow, that punch turned into a gentle backhand nudge, which brushed him onto the floor and sent him safely on his way. Oh man, I'm a real killer, a mean and macho guy. I made the right decision in staying here last night. Not only did it give me hours to relax and absorb the atmosphere of this unique forest, but it also relieved me of packing out a wet tent in the morning. Several bursts of rain dampened the hours just before dawn. When morning broke, it arrived foggy, windy and clammy. The forest appeared even more ancient and eerie, cloaked in the swirling mists. Sometimes the wimpy decisions do turn out to be the best. I started hiking at 7:45. The rough, uneven, rain-soaked ground undid the glue job and tore the front several inches of sole completely off my left boot within 15 minutes. I had to hike for the remainder of the day without it, which soon wore a hole all the way through the bottom of the shoe, keeping my toes wet and numb all day. I think that this spells the end of my second pair of hiking boots on this journey. The trail over the long series of knobs which constituted the Bemis Range was slippery and hazardous from the rain, though not as bad as most of the trail I've walked in Maine. I managed to average 2 miles per hour over the course of the hike, despite the many short, steep ascents and descents, and the rain, which had returned early this morning. There were 4 main summits, but so many lesser knobs in between that I never knew exactly where I was until I emerged onto the open ledges of Second Peak, the second to the last main summit. By this time the wind was absolutely howling, blasting a soaking drizzle around me and chilling me to the bone. I could never get warm, even while hiking flat out. From the ledges, the shifting mists revealed glimpses of wooded hills and distant large lakes looking like fallen fragments of the cold grey sky. I crossed Bemis Stream on the floor of its narrow valley on a wooden footbridge, an unusually effete touch for Maine, and commenced the final mile of ascent to Main Highway 17. I came out of the woods and onto the road at 11:30. I decided to hitchhike into Rangeley from that spot, although it was a much longer hitch than from Main Highway 4, 13 miles ahead on the Appalachian Trail. My boots were finished, so was I. I'd met 2 southbound backpackers this morning, the only other idiots who ventured out on the trail in this lovely weather. They had heard a forecast calling for the rain to end by tonight. That made tomorrow sound like a much better day to begin hiking in my running shoes, which is my only real option until I can get those cheap work boots I bought near Roanoke, Virginia, mailed back to me. The money's running low and I cannot afford a new pair of boots, even if I can find some place that sells them. Main 17 was no major thoroughfare to begin with, and the Appalachian Trail crossing, like so many main road crossings, was in the middle of nowhere. Today, it had to be one of the loneliest spots on earth. It sat part of the way up the steep side of a mountain, and a cold, biting wind was screaming fiercely past. The world was all whites and greys. A solid overcast hung low above me, and smaller clouds streamed past my desolate perch, completely enveloping me on occasion. The rest of the time, I looked out through racing clouds over a vast, bleak grey expanse of trees and an enormous, lonesome lake in the valley below. The only sign of man was the short stretch of empty 2-lane blacktop before me. In the ensuing hour and a half, only 5 or 6 cars passed, and none seemed even tempted to stop for a cold, wet stranger in that remote spot. By this time, I had lost all feeling in my hands and feet. I was ready to give up and hike to the next shelter before I succumbed to exposure and hypothermia when a pickup truck came along and pulled to a stop. It was 12 miles north on Route 17 to Route 4 and another 7 miles southeast on that road to Rangeley. The man who gave me a lift was heading north on Route 4, so he dropped me off at the junction of the 2 roads in a tiny village called Aquaset. I was in a much better position than before the ride. Main 4 was a much busier road, and I was off that mountainside, sheltered from the wind. After less than a half hour, I got another ride. The gentleman was only travelling halfway to Rangeley, but I offered him gas money, and he took me the rest of the way. He turned down the money. Rangeley was a neat, prosperous-looking tourist town wrapped around the northeast corner of a massive lake at the junction of State Highways 4 and 16. It was a village of picturesque inns and guest houses, quaint bed and breakfasts, and little gift shops. I stopped at the nearest motel, the Rangeley Inn, where the rooms turned out to be $32 and $28 per night. Good thing this is the off-season. I explained my money situation and asked about a cheaper place to stay in town. The lady behind the desk told me that one other motel was nearby, slightly cheaper, and a boarding house frequented by hikers. After my cold, miserable morning, I wanted a bathroom of my own where I could partake of a hot shower of epic duration, so I chose to stay at the other motel for $24. Cold rain had sucked the life out of brain and muscle, leaving a numb exhaustion. Immediately upon removing my wet, muddy clothes, I cranked the heat in my room all the way up and crawled into bed. 3 hours of oblivion passed before I woke up, took that shower, and headed over to the grocery store. I replenished my food supply for the trail and picked up some bread, salami, and assorted goodies for dinner tonight. I need rest and a warm bed more than a restaurant dinner. Tomorrow I will see if I can purchase a new watch in town. The one I had stopped for good in the wind-blown dampness of that lonely mountainside. I may grab a restaurant breakfast hitching back to the Appalachian Trail. I'm 43 miles from Stratton, so I'll be there in 3 days. That will push my arrival in Monson back to next Sunday night. Arriving a day earlier would be pointless. I would still need to wait until Monday morning to pick up my supply package at the post office. After Monson, there are no further worries about schedules or mail drops. I passed the 1900-mile mark today. I'm tired. Why does the trail have to be so consistently hazardous here near the end? I spent most of my hike today trying not to lose my footing on wet, mossy ledges. I would hate to have this quest end in disaster, just when I'm so close to the ultimate goal. At Grafton Knot Shelter on Wednesday night, I read a register entry by one of last year's thru-hikers. He had begun hiking from Grafton Notch on an August morning this year, exactly 1 year to the day on which he had severely sprained an ankle and been forced to abandon his hike. I know it could not have felt the same for him when he reached Katahdin. I'm determined not to end my quest in the same manner, but it's so difficult to hike carefully and still make decent mileage through the beautiful but deadly mountains of western Maine. At the present time, I've been unable to do either. I'm crawling along, but I've taken several major spills. The only thing preventing a serious injury is the uncanny aptitude I have developed in landing gently despite my heavy backpack. I almost always manage to spin my falling body and get my hand beneath me to catch myself. I guess if you practice anything often enough, you get good at it. Nevertheless, a slight but troubling aura of doubt still hangs over the outcome of this adventure, with 231.7 miles to go.